40s and 50s, she was the heartthrob of the world. She plays Anna Karenina, and it is played as the high romance. She gives up everything for love, and that is the highest thing in the world to do. But low people, and particularly her unfeeling husband, doesn't understand this, and society condemns it, but society is a bunch of hypocrites, and we have to exalt Anna for this. And this is how a lot of people read it, and my view is if that's what this book were, it wouldn't be worth reading. You have thousands of books with that perspective. That reads the book, in my view, as exactly what it parodies, exactly what it's critiquing, is how they read it. Or another way of putting it is that this is how Anna thinks, and these critics read the book as if Anna were the author. They take Anna's perspective. And by the way, this is one of the reasons why I think the book is called Anna Karenina, because that's what she would have called it. It's all about her. She's a bit of a narcissist. I take it using the minority view on this book, that it's a critique of Anna and the ideology that she believes in. And I'll say that although she's not, a philosopher, this is also a philosophical novel about, among other things, the philosophy of love. That's why you have that conversation of Stephen and Evan at the restaurant about that. And if you go through the history of criticism here, it will be, the two camps. In the minority camp, the one I favor, for reasons I will try to show you, and that includes Tolstoy himself. He was quite explicit about what he meant. But people who are in the majority camp point out, and I think correctly, that the real arbiter of what a work means is the work itself. And it's entirely possible. You want the author's intention, but it's the intention as revealed in the work. What he says after that, or what he said before that, may be evidence for that, but it's not what you're looking for. It's not decisive, because works can be a lot subtler and smarter. The author can be a lot subtler when he's writing the works than when he's offering a brief commenting after it. Or he may be commenting after based on, his changed point of view and what he wished he had written later. And Tolstoy, by the way, is thoroughly believed what I'm telling you now was possible, and that you have to rely on the work rather than what the author says outside the work, because there's a really famous essay he wrote about a Chekhov story where he precisely says Chekhov meant to do something simplistic, but being a real genius, he actually wrote something much more complex than he realized and much better, and that's what matters. So the people who are in the majority camp reject Tolstoy's own comments for that reason. And I think they give too little weight to his comments, but it's possible. I'm going to try to show you why I think the book is a critique of what Anna does and thinks, above all. That's why I'm doing the close reading here. You've got one little sample of it, not conclusive at all, with when you get Tolstoy saying, and here she considered what would touch Dolly most, would touch me most, and here she said, so a little bit of deceit there. But not a big one. You're going to see more that's coming. What goes with the majority view is a particular portrait of Karenin. And remember that Anna is trying to see Karenin in the worst possible way, and I showed you how she does that bit by altering her. You can't do it all at once, you have to do it step by step by step, and Tolstoy shows you many of the steps along the way, and how hints at others by the fact that she can mimic him, which takes a lot of practice in hostile observing. And what she tries to tell herself, and later will say explicitly, she knows that this is what she was doing and that it was false. What she tries to see him as is someone who is either a monster with bad feelings or a machine with no feelings. Of course, those two contradict each other, but it doesn't matter. They both mean that she can't live with him. She has no choice, and she has to do what she's doing. And so people who want to be on Anna's side see Karenin in that way. Now, you notice that even Anna at the beginning doesn't see him that way. She respects him, she admires him. But in a passage like this, he had seen nothing improper in what they were doing, but others did. And so he wanted to talk with her about it. The pro-Anna camp sees this as meaning what Anna will later say about him. He doesn't care at all whether she's in love with somebody else, whether she's having an affair with somebody else. All he cares is about propriety and that other people will talk about it. So if you want to believe this line, then I ask you to keep looking at all the times when you get passages where, well, does Karenin feel jealousy or not? Is he upset or not? If he is, then this interpretation must be wrong, right? Anna will say he's a puppet, he's a machine, he can't feel. Those are direct quotes of passages you may have gotten to by now. But is it true? So you get these two perspectives here, and then you might want to ask, well, if the book is so much a critique of romantic love, why do so many readers, and I mean very intelligent readers, not see it that way? And that is what, why do they overlook all the evidence that's in the book? And that's a very important question, which I will try to address later. But let's go back to this passage here in part 2, chapter 8. At the bottom of the page, he's been thinking about all this, and you get the passage that says, Alexei Alexandrovich was not jealous. Now, I think you're going to read this passage as I go on here as not the author saying it, but it's like, remember that passage with Anna saying, there was nothing to be ashamed of. It's what she's saying to herself. And I think it's very clear that this is what Karenin is saying to himself. I am not jealous. Okay? Well, how do we know that? Let's keep reading. Alexei Alexandrovich was not jealous. Jealousy, according to his notions, was an insult to one's wife, and one ought to have confidence in one's wife. Why one ought to have confidence? The author's mocking him here. That is to say, complete conviction that his young wife would always love him. He did not ask himself. But he had no experience of lack of confidence because he had confidence in her and told himself that he ought to have it. You can see the problem with the reasoning here, right? I have complete confidence. Why do you have complete confidence? I have complete confidence because people should have complete confidence, and because people should have complete confidence, I have complete confidence. You can believe anything that way, right? Now, though, his conviction that jealousy was a shameful feeling, and that one ought to feel confidence had not broken down as a conviction, he felt that he was standing face to face with something illogical and irrational, and did not know what was to be done. Alexei Alexandrovich was standing face to face with life, with the possibility of his wife's loving someone other than himself, and this seemed him very irrational and incomprehensible because it was life itself. Karenin is at home in rules. Remember I told you how Tolstoy loved rules. Karenin is at home in rules, and everything that can be set down clearly and explicitly on paper, not with the complexities of life itself, right? That is one of his shortcomings, right? It makes him a great bureaucrat, but makes it impossible for him to understand what's going on here. All his life, Alexei Alexandrovich had lived and worked in official spheres, dealing with the reflections of life. And every time he had stumbled against life itself, he had shrunk away from it. Now he experienced a feeling akin to that of a man who, while crossing a bridge over a precipice, should suddenly discover that the bridge is broken and that there's a chasm below. The chasm was life itself, the bridge, that artificial life in which Alexei Alexandrovich had lived. For the first time, the question presented itself to him of the possibility of his wife loving someone other than himself. What that means is, the author is testifying, he was never jealous before. And he was horrified at it. He did not undress, but he walked up and down with his even steps over the resounding parquet of the dining room. And skipping a few sentences, he walked across her boudoir to the bedroom door and turned back again. At each turn in his walk, he's going back and forth, especially at the parquet of the lighted dining room, he halted and said to himself, this I must decide and put a stop to. I must express my view of it and my decision. And he turned back again, but express what? What decision? He said to himself in the drawing room, and found no reply. But after all, he asked himself before turning into the boudoir, what has occurred? Nothing. She was talking a long while with him. But what of that? Surely women in society can talk to whom they please. And then, jealousy means lowering both myself and her, he told himself, his dictum up to now. And he went into her boudoir. But this dictum, which had always carried such weight with him before, now carried no weight and had no meaning at all. And from the bedroom door, he turned back again. But as he entered the drawing room, something in her voice told him that it was not so. And that if others noticed it, there was something in it. That's my interpretation, right? Not that he only cares about propriety, but that if other notices it, there was something in it. And he said to himself again in the dining room, yes, I must decide and put a stop to it, express my view of it. And again, in the turn in the drawing room, he asked himself, decide how? And again, he asked himself what had occurred, and answered nothing, and recollected that jealousy was a feeling insulting to his wife. But again in the drawing room, he was convinced that something had happened. His thoughts, like his body, went round in a complete circle, back and forth, without coming upon anything new. He noticed this, rubbed his forehead, and sat down in her boudoir. You see, Alexei Alexandrovich was not jealous. Jealousy, he thought to himself, was insulting to one's wife and not a proper thing to feel. So I am not jealous. I am not jealous. But surely, if other people noticed it, there was something in it. But no, I am not jealous. You see, because jealousy would be a bad thing to feel and would be an insult. But why was she? Okay, it's perfectly clear that he's telling himself he doesn't feel jealousy, but everything he does shows that he feels jealousy, just the way Anna was telling herself that nothing improper had happened when she knew something had. So now, at the end of the chapter, he decides how he's going to speak to her. And it's the perfect speech of a bureaucrat. Okay? Do not ever, ever speak like this to your spouse or anyone you really care about. I must say and express the following points. First, exposition of the value to be attached to public opinion and decorum. Second, exposition of religious significance of marriage. Third, if need be, reference to the calamity possibly ensuing to our son. Oh, come on. Paragraph 1, subsection A. Paragraph subsection B1, B2, B3. You're on a 403K. But you can't talk like this about love or just about anything else that matters except the tax code. But that's all he knows how to do. He can feel emotion deeply, but he can't express it. He lives in society, but he doesn't understand how to communicate. Well, in the next chapter, she comes back, and he tries to talk with her. But she, completely consumed with her, the feelings evoked by Vronsky just before, and the intense, romantic, erotic feelings that she's having, the last thing she wants to do is have a conversation with her husband. So she is going to try to avoid having a conversation. Now, If he wants a conversation, and she wants to avoid the conversation, are they going to have a conversation? Anyone? No. Yeah, I mean, you have here, a social idiot and a social Einstein. Who is going to outmaneuver whom? Okay, it's perfectly clear that if she doesn't want to have this conversation, and she doesn't, no matter what he does, they're not going to have it. Okay. And you're going to see here, and in some other passages, because she's going to take this habit of avoiding things, and it doesn't want to talk about Vronsky, so you'll see it later there. This is a study about how people do this. Okay? When you watch this sort of thing happening, you'll know that you've seen it before. Okay? You'll recognize this in life. Anna came in with bowed head, playing with the tassels of her hood. Her face was brilliantly glowing, but this glow was not one of brightness. It suggested a fearful glow of a conflagration in the midst of a dark night. That's her feelings. On seeing her husband, Anna raised her head and smiled as though she had just waked up. She's completely absorbed in this. "You're not in bed? What a surprise," she said, letting her hood fall. And without stopping, she went into the dressing room. She doesn't want to talk, but she wants to lie down. "It's late, Alexei Alexandrovich," she said when she had gone through the doorway. Now, the fact that he stayed up means she knows instantly that he wants to talk. She's smart enough to know about what. So, oh, you're still up. It's late. Goodbye. Into the next room. "Anna, it's as if he'd have a talk with you." "With me?" she said with surprise. "What, is there somebody else in the room?" She came out from behind the door of the dressing room and looked at him. "Why, what is it? What about?" she asked, sitting down. "Well, let's talk if it's unnecessary, but it would be better to sleep. This is not a very... there's something really important I want to talk to you." "Oh, all right, if you insist, let's talk, but, it's not exactly the audience you're looking for, right?" Anna said what came to her lips and marveled, hearing herself, at her own, underline this, capacity for lying. How simple and natural were her words, and how likely that she was simply sleeping. She felt herself clad in an impenetrable armor of falsehood. She felt that some unseen force had come to her aid and was supporting her. Notice how simple and natural her words. I mentioned that phrase often associated with her, her dress, which is quote-unquote fake simplicity, right? Anna marveled at her own capacity for lying. How is she lying? If by lying you mean say something untrue, what has she said? You couldn't point to anything, and yet Tolstoy calls it lying. And she thinks of it herself that way. Here you really have to understand another one of Tolstoy's ideas about honesty and truthfulness. You usually think of truthfulness or lying as a matter of how you speak. Lying is false speaking. But in a real conversation, both sides are active. What you say is shaped by the reactions of the one you're with. If it's writing, it's the anticipated reactions. It's part of a dialogue in which both sides are active. For that reason, there is such a thing not only as false speaking, but false listening. You can deliberately misconstrue what's being said. You can not pay attention or care what the meaning is, but just seize on a word or two. You could take things out of context. You could try to redirect the conversation to a different channel. You could pretend you don't understand when you do understand. All these things, you understand, would be examples of false listening. And this is the kind of lying Anna is doing here, you see? And she feels it herself. She feels clad in an impenetrable armor of falsehood. Her reactions, she knows perfectly well what he means, why he wants to talk to her. And she knows perfectly well that in fact she was doing something that she shouldn't have been doing. And that's why she doesn't want to have the conversation. She knows all this. "Anna, I must warn you," he began. "Warn me?" she said. "Of what? What could you possibly be talking about?" She looked at him so simply, so brightly, that anyone who did not know her as her husband knew her could not have noticed anything unnatural, either in the sound or the sense of her words. Now get the next sentence here. But to him, knowing her, knowing that whenever he went to bed 5 minutes later than usual, she noticed it and asked him the reason. To him, knowing that every joy, every pleasure and pain that she felt, she communicated to him at once. To him now, she did not care to notice his state of mind, that she did not care to say a word about herself, meant a great deal. Think about this. We're told that if he goes to bed 5 minutes later than usual, she asks him why, what's on his mind. She shares her joys and pleasures and pain with him. This has always been what their marriage has been. Now, note, is that a description to you of the marriage from hell, which she's going to say it is? It clearly is not. The portrait that she is going to give, or that critics who interpret Karenina in this way give, they have to overlook this passage. And it's very easy to overlook, in fact, because, and this is really important here to get this, it's put as a series of subordinate clauses, knowing this, knowing that, in a long sentence, in the middle of a long paragraph, and sometimes when Tolstoy does this, the paragraph is mostly about something else. In fact, in this case, it is. Right? In this case, it's about why she isn't listening to him, and all that information about what their marriage was like before is just subordinate to that. It's not the main point. But you want to ask, and Tolstoy does this many times, the real information is camouflaged. It's put in a way like, that peasant at the train station, so that you can read it and yet still miss it. Why does Tolstoy do it that way? And we're going to have lots of examples of this. The most important things are camouflaged. Okay? Well, remember that one of his points is that we tend to notice only the most noticeable things. That if you see a distant hill with trees on it, you might falsely conclude that the area contains nothing but trees. Things that are very important, like happy families, they don't call attention to each other. If you read the newspaper, you'd think that, the world was nothing but crimes and fires, and right? Read the local paper. Because every time there's a crime and a fire, it's reported for every house where there's not a crime. That they don't say, well, at 2615 Payne Street, there was no fire today. The most important things, the things we tend not to notice or credit, like the value of being a good mother, as you're going to see with Dolly. The whole portrait of Dolly is an example of this, because she's not in the forefront of the book. You can tell that because films and abridgments leave her out as much as possible. The most important things are right before your eyes. They are right there, hidden in plain view, but you do not see them because you're directing your attention elsewhere. If you can learn to redirect your attention from the noticeable to what's apparently small but important, all those tiny things, tiny alterations, you will see life entirely differently. You will appreciate, for one thing, the ordinary facts, aspects of life. You will stop thinking that life is about grand moments or dramatic events. There's a witticism that Abraham Lincoln was supposed to have said that God must have loved the common people because he made so many of them. Of course, it's a joke because that's what common means by definition, right? But you can imagine the same joke if Tolstoy made it would be, God must have loved the ordinary events because he made so many of them. Romantic love is all about the valuing the extraordinary, the cult of genius, the cult of war, the cult of revolution, the cult of dramatic. What makes you love opera? Tolstoy hated opera, everything we call melodramatic. We tend to think that's what life is, but Tolstoy is trying to tell you, no. It's the sum total of the 100 million ordinary moments is far more important. And indeed, even what happens at the extraordinary ones is completely shaped by what happened at the ordinary ones. In War and Peace, he tells you that this is how you must understand historical causation. Here, he's telling you this is how you must understand your own life and how you experience. And so, to teach you to redirect your attention to what you would not normally notice, he's constantly giving you little lessons in it by camouflaging key information so that it's right in front of your eyes, but you don't see it. I remember when I was when I was writing a book on War and Peace, when I was much younger, I found a passage, an incident that was occupied a whole chapter that I thought was very interesting, but I didn't know why it was in the book. And so I went to my teacher, the man who advised my dissertation, and I asked him what he thought, why it was there. And he flatly denied that it was in the book. He'd read War and Peace several times. He recalled no such passage. I had to actually take out the text and show it to him. And it wasn't short. It was a chapter that was 3 pages long. It was not like a line here. Well, your attention, you understand, focuses on what you think is most important, what's most dramatic. And so you can miss things. He's trying to get you, by seeding the important information in this camouflaged way, to teach you to redirect your attention. And you're going to see some of the characters learn to do this too, but your experience of reading becomes part of it. He saw that the inmost recesses of her soul, which had always hitherto laid open to him, were closed against him. More than that, he saw from her tone that she was not even perturbed at that, but seemed to say openly to him, yes, it's shut up, and so it must be in the future. Now he experienced a feeling such as a man might have on returning home and finding his own house locked up. But perhaps the key may yet be found, by Alexei Alexandrovich. I want to warn you, he said in a low voice, that through thoughtlessness and lack of caution, you may cause yourself to be talked about in society. You see, he's trying as much as he can not to accuse her of doing anything wrong. That is, not to accuse her of having a romance with Vronsky. And so he puts it in the least offensive way. Well, by carelessness, accidentally, you may get rumors talking. No, hey, why are you having are you falling in love with that guy? Well, he puts it in the least offensive way he can. Isn't that what most of us would do? And say, your too animated conversation this evening with Count Vronsky, he enunciated the name firmly and with deliberate emphasis, attracted attention. Why does he enunciate the name Vronsky with emphasis? Because if you were really consumed with jealousy, you couldn't even say the name. You said, with that man! The fact that he says the name means he takes it just like any other name. It might as well be with Princess Betsy. Who knows? Right? Whoever it just happened to be. But of course he says it with deliberate emphasis to show that he is not showing something, you see, which already, is kind of, she will perceive this. But he talked and looked at her laughing eyes. which frightened him now with their impenetrable look, which he hadn't seen before. And as he talked, he felt the utter uselessness and futility of his words. Try to talk to somebody who doesn't want to talk to you and is good at it, and you will feel this sense of, there's nothing you can do. You've told yourself, you're going to have this conversation, you're going to have it out with him, and there's nothing you can do. You'll experience this in life. Don't imagine that, oh yeah, well, I'll confront him someday, and I'll tell him, I'll ask him how he'd answer this. It's not going to happen, unless he's an idiot. He'll avoid it. You're always like that, she answered, as though completely misunderstanding him. And if all he had said, only taking the last phrase, one time you don't like my being bored, another time you don't like my being lively. I wasn't bored. Does that offend you? That is, she takes the phrase, your too lively conversation with Count Vronsky attracted attention, as not, you shouldn't be talking with Vronsky that way, but you're a little too lively in your tones of voice. Now she knows perfectly well that isn't the point. But any sentence can be misread in that way. Okay, so one of the techniques of not understanding is to do something like this. Alexei Alexandrovich shivered and bent his hands to make the joints crack, one of his habits when he's frustrated. Okay? I can't do it, or I do it for you right here. Oh, please don't do that. I so dislike it, she said. This is great. Now she can turn the conversation to his annoying habits. Okay. Anna, is this you? said Alexei, quietly making an effort over himself and restraining the motion of his fingers. But what is it all about, she said, with such genuine and comic wonder. Tolstoy calling it such genuine wonder suggests, of course, it's not genuine. What do you want of me? Alexei Alexandrovich paused and rubbed his forehead and his eyes. He saw that instead of doing as he had intended, that is to say, warning his wife against a mistake in the eyes of the world, he had unconsciously become agitated over what was the affair of her conscience. That is, that she might actually be in love with him, and was struggling against a barrier, he thought, between them. This is what I meant to say to you, he went on, coldly and composedly, now trying to reassert control by going back to what he planned to say. Have you ever noticed that whenever you plan a conversation with somebody, I'll say this, and this, and this, and that, it never, absolutely never happens? And you know why it never happens? Because conversation, dialogue, is a two-sided act. The other person doesn't sit there passively. Even if the other person doesn't say anything, the way he listens shapes what you say. What's more, contingent events, like the phone can ring, right? At a crucial moment. It just doesn't happen that way. To happen that way would mean you could absolutely control what was going the world, and you can't. Right? I consider jealousy, as you know, a humiliating and degrading feeling, and I shall never allow myself to be influenced by it, which suggests that he is, of course. And there are certain rules of decorum which cannot be regarded with impunity. This evening, it was not I who observed it, but judging by the impression made on the company, everyone observed that your conduct and deportment were not altogether what could be desired. You see, it's not just me. Others thought so too. I positively don't understand, said Anna, shrugging her shoulders. Of course she does. And then, he doesn't care, she thought, but other people noticed it, and that's what upsets him. Now she's seizing on this notion of saying that he only cares about social propriety. That's how she's interpreting. Other people noticed it. You're not well, Alexei Alexandrovich, she added, getting up and moving towards the door, but he moved as if to stop her. You're trying to have a serious conversation, and the other person says to you, you're not well. I mean, if you were trying to infuriate somebody, that's what you, listen, I'm really upset about what you did, on such and such a day. Have you been taking your anxiety medication? It completely discredits anything the person could say and infantilizes the person, right? Diminishes the person. His face, he tries to stop her. His face was ugly and forbidding, as Anna had never seen him. She stopped and bending her head back to one side, she began rapidly taking out her hairpins. Somebody's trying to, go on, you talk, I'll just take out my hairpins here. I'll just, no, don't let it bother you. Her gestures are wonderful, to convey just what she's also doing. Well, I'm listening to what's to come, she said calmly and ironically. And indeed, I listened with interest, for I should like to understand what's the matter. She spoke, and marveled at the confident, calm, and natural tone in which she was speaking, and the joy she was. She's herself impressed by her own performance. Going down a little. I don't understand a word, and oh dear, how sleepy I am, unfortunately, she said, rapidly passing her hand through her hair, feeling for the remaining hairpins. Anna, for God's sake, don't speak like that, he said gently. Perhaps I am mistaken, but believe me when I say as much for myself as for you. I am your husband, and I love you. This is a long way from point 1 sub A, point 1. This is actually what he's feeling. He's actually said something genuine and feeling here. And so for an instant her face fell, and the sardonic gleam in her eyes died away. But the word love threw into revolt again. She thought, love? Can he love? If he hadn't heard such a thing as love, he would never use the word. You've heard that phrase? If he had never heard of love, he would never feel it, right? If you haven't heard the word. You ever heard that cliche? I mean, nobody's heard it? Oh, wow, I thought everyone had heard that cliche. He wouldn't know what love is if he hadn't heard the word. It was a cliche 150 years ago, too. I remember people saying it, all the time when I was growing up. You see, by the way, there are going to be a lot of cliches that, some of which I know, because I've asked every class, about them. That were cliches back then. He doesn't know what love is. Alexei, I don't understand. Now, here I want to point out something that you couldn't possibly know, but some of the readers might know. I mentioned which novel Anna was reading on the train. It was a novel by one of the great English novelists. I bet none of you have read anything by him. Anthony Trollope, son of another great writer, Fanny Trollope. Anthony Trollope, if you think of the truly first-rate English novelists, George Eliot and Dickens and Jane Austen, then right below that come some very good, but not quite as good people like the Bronte sisters, Thackeray, and Trollope. But Trollope is particularly popular because he writes things that are just easy to digest and read, even though they're very, very interesting. The BBC loves to make, movies of Trollope, and there's some wonderful ones, including a long, multi-part, 50 episodes, something like that, of a sequence of novels that he wrote, 6 novels, not a trilogy, but 6 novels linked together, called the Palliser novels, because